sea. She loved the sound of the waves calling to her through her window. She dreamt every night of the mysteries that lay beneath. Her father was a fisherman. Each day he went out to sea, and each night Merryn waited at the rocky cliff edge, holding up a candle to guide him safely home. The two of them were poor. Their roof was leaky, and they sometimes went hungry. But as long as they had each other, Merryn knew they would be okay. At night, her father sang her songs about his great adventures. He sang of giant leviathan serpents, haunted caves, and a lost city of gold beneath the sea. Merryn knew the stories weren't real, but she loved to listen to them. She drifted off to sleep, imagining the wonders of the world below. And her life continued that way, simply and happily, until one night, her father didn't return. Merryn held up her candle at the cliff's edge all through the night, staring out at the empty sea. She shivered in the cold wind as she watched for him all the next day. Her eyes welled with tears as night fell again and there was still no sign of her father. At last, she collapsed into sleep. In her dreams, she saw him, trapped deep beneath the sea, calling to her for help. She awoke with a jolt. A desperate and dangerous plan was already forming in her head. She took scraps of metal and wood her father had caught in his nets and pieced them together. She hammered and bolted, she measured and sawed. And before the sun had set, she had built a tiny, rickety submarine. With trembling hands, she squeezed inside and dove down beneath the waves to search for her father. The world beneath the waves shimmered with mystery. Glow-kelp bulbs lit up around her as she passed by. At last, the Merrow maiden stopped. Merryn called to her. "Please wait. I'm only trying to find my father." The Merrow looked at her for a long moment, then stirred the water with her hands, forming a ghostly image. It was the sunken ship graveyard known as Skeleton Reef. Could her father be trapped there? The Merrow pointed the way to go, and Merryn thanked her. Before she turned to go, Merryn asked the Merrow her name. "Call me Cara," she said. "Another girl once called me that, years ago. She said it means friend." Merryn froze as she saw a Fomori sentinel ahead of her. Of all their creations, the sentinels were the ones Merryn feared the most. There were once thousands of these unmanned vessels, patrolling every inch of the sea. They collected what was valuable to the Fomori and destroyed what was not. And so they might continue, following their sleepless patrols until everything under the sea is silent and still. The pieces of the Fomori sentinel drift down toward the sea floor. She knew it had very nearly been her down there instead. Merryn returned to the cocoon. Her heart sank. It wasn't her father inside. Just a funny-looking little sea serpent. A baby leviathan. The little serpent swam around in circles, waving its tail as if to say, "Thank you." Merryn tried to shoo it away, back to wherever it lived. But the odd little creature just followed her. The young serpent wanted to play. It swam back and forth, swishing its tail, trying to get Merryn's attention. Perhaps, she thought, doesn't hurt to have just one friend in the lonely depths of the sea. Swish. She would call him Swish. Swish dove down, playfully rummaging around the debris that lay below. Merryn was about to call him back when she saw that he had found something. Merryn looked over the curious contraption that Swish had found, trying to guess at its purpose. After a little work, she discovered a way to use it for channeling and projecting time energy. Swish swam in front of Merryn and waved his tail eagerly. He wanted her to follow. Merryn had discovered an old diving suit. She put it on, and in a pocket of the suit she found a striped seashell tied to a string. It looked just like the one her father kept above the fireplace. She tied the string around her neck, hoping the shell would bring her luck. Merryn held her breath and dove out through the submarine's hatch. She noticed bubbles coming out of the shell around her neck. Putting it to her mouth, she gently breathed in and felt the air fill her cheeks. Were these the same shells that were once used by ancient explorers? As Merryn approached, Cara slowly lifted her head. She looked pale and weak. With a gentle wave of her hand, she showed Merryn a shimmering image of a tall tower beneath the sea. Cara spoke softly, and there was a touch of pain in her voice.
This is the Deep Light. It was built long ago, and now lies dormant. If you awaken the tower, it will show you the way to find your father.
She leaned closer and whispered the secret of how to awaken the Deep Light. Merryn thanked her and said goodbye. She would find some way to repay Cara's kindness once she had found her father. The resonance orbs that once powered the Deep Light had been scattered across the sea. Cara had marked their locations on Merryn's map, but she warned that retrieving them would be a very dangerous task. As Merryn approached the gate of the Forbidden City, the clockwork seahorse warned her to stay away. But she had come this far and would not turn back, regardless of the danger that lay ahead. As the gate to the city opened, Merryn was ambushed by Fomori sentinels. Before she could react, they launched their torpedoes at the defenseless clockwork seahorse. Merryn watched in horror as its gleaming golden body was blasted into pieces that fell, lifeless and dull, to the sea floor. Blinded by rage, Merryn turned back to face the deadly sentinels. Taking out her tools, Merryn connected the tiny gears and springs, one by one. At last, she saw a glow return to the seahorse's emerald eyes. Beyond the gate, Merryn gasped in awe as she looked up at the face of an elder sea dragon. The graceful giant studied her. Its eyes were older than the Merrows, older even than the Watcher. "I want to help," Merryn said at last. "I'll do anything you ask." And no sooner had she said those words than she saw a vision. She saw how the Fomori had once tamed a giant beast called the Rimorosa. It was a fierce and intelligent creature whose powerful tentacles could kill the largest leviathan in the sea. But it rebelled against the Fomori and drove them away. Now only their machines remain, gradually destroying what is left of the sea. The dreaded Rimorosa, still tormented by the shackles of the Fomori, lives on in the depths below the Forbidden City. It preys on the human vessels above, exacting revenge against those who imprisoned it. Merryn looked back, up into the eyes of the sea dragon, and asked again, "What can I do?" But the sea dragon merely replied, "It is too late. There is nothing left to do." Merryn would not accept this. She would not simply give up. Even if it was too late, she would still try. What if the Rimorosa was somehow connected to the Fomori Sentinels? What if the Rimorosa was causing the destruction of the sea? If she could defeat that terrible beast, it might help to save Kara. If her father was still here, this is what he would do. From the fragrant purple blossoms. And when she reopened her eyes, she no longer felt alone. She was ready to complete her journey. At last, Merryn had reached her destination, the lair of the Rimorosa. She had prepared herself to face anything, and still she wasn't ready for what she saw next. There, trapped inside a diving bell but still alive, was her father. As its mechanical faceplate shattered, the Rimorosa was at last free from the Fomori's control. The creature swooped out of its lair, smashing through the columns of rock beneath the Forbidden City. The heavy city began to collapse under its own weight and fall down into the trench below. Merryn raced to free her father from the diving bell, but the collapsing city was falling down all around her. Merryn grasped her father's hand as an avalanche of debris plummeted toward them. She closed her eyes as the darkness fell over her. when she opened her eyes, there was a roof of green, gleaming scales above her. A giant queen leviathan had taken the brunt of the blow from the falling debris. A moment later, a much smaller serpent swam down toward her. It was Swish. "Is this your mother, Swish?" Merryn asked in astonishment. But Swish just wagged his tail and beckoned for her to grab on. She and her father grabbed hold of the two leviathans, and together they swam up, out of the still collapsing debris of the Forbidden City. They swam out of the darkness and into the gleaming rays of sunlight that streaked through the water's surface. And at last, for the first time in what seemed like ages, Merryn and her father looked out over the waves toward their house in the distance. They said goodbye to the pair of leviathans, and Merryn promised to come play with Swish each day in the deep waters below the cliffs. And bit by bit, Merryn's life slowly went back to normal. She and her father traded a few of Merryn's golden coins for a beat-up old fishing boat. Working side by side, they soon had it ready to sail. Merryn no longer had to wait at the cliff's edge. Her father took her out to sea whenever she wanted to go. As they fished, they shared the stories of their own great adventures, both knowing that every word was true. And sometimes, late at night, Merryn thought of all the mysteries she had yet to answer. She thought of Cara, the sea garden, the eggs, and hoped they were all safe. Someday, she thought, someday I will see them again.